Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We have both Sarah Burton of Sabbaticus Farm and Ashley Shupe of Shupe Farms presenting today for us on artificial insemination. So many of us are using this technology, and it's so common now because it means that we don't have to retain bulls on our property. And for those of us that are retaining bulls, we want to know what the market needs so that we can be prepared in raising our bulls for AI collection. So they're going to share with us how the process works and how we can be most likely to succeed. And this is being presented by the board of PMJS, the Purebred Mini Jersey Society. We are the registry if you're interested in making sure that your mini jerseys are pure Jersey DNA, that they have all those great traits that we all love about jerseys in the full size, the standard jerseys. We register cows, but we are so much more than just a registry. We will mentor you, we will support you, we'll help you make your decisions. We're going to talk a little bit today about selecting a bull that you're going to use for AI, but we just published a new blog post. You'll want to look for somewhere around the April 24th of 2024 that we published that blog post specifically about selecting a bull, but there are other great blog posts about similar topics as well on our website, which is purebredminijerseys.org. Right? And let's go ahead and introduce Sarah Burton and have her explain a little bit about what she's doing. And then Ashley, if you could share what you're doing on your homestead as well.
Okay. Sure, thank you. Thanks, Lorinda. This is Sarah. So I operate with my husband, Sabbaticus Farm. We're a 100% A2 raw milk herd share. We have 7 cows. We have a mixture of mini, standard, and mid-sized cows, but we came involved with Purebred Mini Society because we knew that we wanted to produce high quality milk from smaller cows. And that would be difficult to do if we didn't know accurate genealogies on our cows. So rather than trying to take shots in the dark, we teamed up with PMJS, which has made it a lot easier to source the animals that we need. I am very passionate about educating beginners in the search for mini Jersey cows because there are a lot of variables out there that can either help your cow perform at the top of their ability or bring it down. So yeah, that's my focus.
Thanks, Sarah, and thank you, Lorinda. This is Ashley. So what we do in Shupe Farms is actually a commercial size farm for corn and soybeans. So my husband, his brother Grant, and their father Todd Shupe operate and run the entire farm. Right now, it was started by their grandfather in 1962. So they do all the running right now. We're in planting season, actually. So it's a little crazy. But what brought me here to PMJS is I wanted jerseys. I wanted mini jerseys, but like with mini jerseys comes with a price tag. And I, at the time, could not afford a mini jersey. So I wanted to have a full-size jersey and breed her down to a mini jersey without losing the integrity of the jersey breed. Lucky for me, actually, not even a week into my search, I found Lorinda, and she took me under her wing and mentored me and explained to me the importance of not only keeping the jersey pure. I had and bred my cows down to the mini Jersey cows, and it's been a long haul.
Right. So. But then with the access to the AI bulls, you've got so much more genetics to pull from so that you Correct. Can find those bulls that are going to take the height down because they've already got the lower stature score with genomics. And exactly. You don't have to wait so many generations or make mistakes. You know, some years you don't get the height down like you wanted to, or maybe you even get it too low and you need to add back the other way. But AI gives us more access to that. So that's great. All right, so I've switched to the next page. We're on the presentation outline. These are the things we're going to touch on today that Ashley and Sarah are going to share with us. So it's very logically put together, so it doesn't need to be overwhelming. It's really a fairly simple process. So let's see, there we go. All right. We're on selecting a sire.
Okay, so selecting a sire, the first thing we wanted to touch on were obviously the bulls. The bulls is the most important part of this whole course, right? This is where we have to start. Now, with bulls, there's a few highlights that we want to touch on, specifically fertility, the dairy traits, age and height at collection, and genetic and disease testing, of course, which is probably one of the most controversial topics. And so to start off with fertility, we want to ask ourselves what kind of calves these bulls are producing. Are they producing higher bulls? Are they taller? Are they shorter? What do the calves look like? Do they look like jerseys? Are they going to be have that white ring around their nose? Are they going to be built like a jersey and not so stocky? Specifically, like this second picture, you can tell by looking at it, it's definitely not a jersey. You can tell that first picture, it's definitely a jersey.
Right. He's got the right nose band. He's got the right proportions.
Correct.
You can see with his ears, just even the shape of the head, that
Yes.
is more of a dairy bull, where the one on the bottom looks very beefy, not just in his build, but how stocky he is. And he's very fertile. He's got lots of curly hair and things, but he looks like he's probably a Dexter, maybe a red Dexter cross. And I see them that look very similar to this pretty often, and they will be called a mini Jersey. And obviously that's not a jersey, and there's something else crossed in with it.
Correct. And we have to be careful because sometimes they can look a lot like a jersey, but there's these small little traits that you can just tell that they're mixed in with something else. So that brings us to the dairy treats. We want to ask about the bull's sire. We want to ask about the bull's dam. Where did this bull come from? What is his history? What did his mom look like? What did his dad look like? Do they have good production, specifically for their dam? Are we going to have a dam that produces every year? Or is this a dam that had one bull in 5 years? Those are all very important traits to ask when you're looking to buy a straw or looking to buy a set of straws. Another thing that's super important, and I think it's looked over quite a bit, is the age and height at collection. This is something that's super important because if you're collecting a bull that's under 3 years old, they're not at that secured height yet. They're not at that locked in height. You want to make sure that they're locked in at that age 3. So when we go ahead and breed them, you're not going to add any more height if height is something that's important to you.
That's so important. I see sometimes where they'll say that the bull is 40 inches, but is he 40 inches at a year old? Is he 40 inches at 3 years old, 6 years old? And that makes a big difference. So it's important that that detail is shared.
Correct. And then the next thing is genetic testing. Like I said, genetic and disease testing. We want to obviously test our dams. We know that, but the bulls are just as important as the dams are. We want to ask about the beta casing. We want to ask, are they pulled? Are they horned? Have they been fed grain? Are they just on grass? We want to ask all these questions to make sure that they fit your farm management.
Right.
Sarah's farm management is going to be different than my farm management. And the same thing goes for Lorinda. I mean, everybody has a different management. And you do what works for you. So you want to make sure it fits into your goals and what you want to produce in your herd.
Right. I assumed that the collection facilities had some rules or laws about testing for diseases so that things weren't being spread throughout the United States. I had assumed that incorrectly because I came to find out that those facilities actually they don't have to test. There's no law that says, especially for the collections that are done on farm, there's no testing that's required. So a bull could be chondro, he could be carrying a disease, and those things are going to be spread. So it's really up to you to ask as the consumer to make sure that the seller is providing you with documentation, specifically BVD, blue tongue, and IBR can be spread, and trick. We know trick can be spread. Once the straw is frozen and thawed, those diseases are still viable and could infect your cow. So you don't want to buy straws from a source that hasn't taken the time to correctly test and make sure that your cow's protected. Okay. Where
Should
do we
we
find an AI tech?
Should we ask any questions if there's any questions for that slide?
I actually have a question.
Okay.
I thought that was super interesting to see a 6-year-old bull will produce more bull calves. Is there like a tipping point once they get to a certain age where they tend to produce more bull calves, or how does that work?
So statistically speaking, they've just showed that bulls that are older typically will, when you're collecting them, they will see more male sperm rather than female sperm. So it's just a matter of statistics there.
Genetics.
Genetics. Have you heard that too, Lorinda?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
It's why I
Mhm.
made the choice to collect Vanguard, who's the first bull we collected at 16 months old, because our first straws were conventional and I wanted to give people the best option at having heifers. And the thought behind it scientifically is that as a bull is aging, he starts to produce more sons who would then go on to share his genetics and eventually replace him if our cattle were roaming wild. But that's kind of the thought, is that that's why they start producing more males as heirs rather than daughters as they age.
You have to try to find that sweet spot between trying to get that height and that age and trying to collect at that age so we can get as many heifers as we can, especially if you're collecting with conventional straws.
Okay, sorry, I jumped the gun before. We'll
No,
be
you're
moving
fine.
on here to where do we find a tech who can help us do our breeding?
So we've got a really great list here. You can find techs at the PMJS website in the resources section. You can also try sourcing a tech in your local large animal veterinarian. I have attempted to do this in the past and ended up finding out that my pricing was quite high with a veterinarian. So just be aware that might be a pricier way to go. There are agricultural universities that offer these services. Sometimes AI techs will advertise it on Craigslist. There's also AI sire catalogs, but that one has a bit of a caveat because oftentimes if you're looking for somebody who's employed by, XYZ semen company, and they have this sire catalog, those techs are not allowed to use any bull semen except from what comes out of that catalog. And I've never ever seen a sire catalog carrying mini jerseys. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I don't think that exists.
Yeah.
It's just somebody who, if you were in a desperate situation and needed to get a cow bred, they might have an option for you, maybe, or at least a connection.
Right.
Facebook homestead groups are a really great place to ask that question. There's often one or two in a community. And then, of course, the Mini Jersey Bulls and AI Straws group on Facebook, which is moderated by PMJS. And so we try to do our best to make sure that the bulls that are listed on there adhere to the breed standard, that they have the testing that should be done, that they are only going to do good things in a herd, as opposed to just kind of picking randomly and hoping for the best. We are very dedicated to making sure the animals that are listed are animals that can bring a benefit to you and not detract or create problems in your herd.
Correct. And I would say try using all of these, not just stick to one, because you want to broaden your resources. You want to make sure you're tapping into every single resource you can. So
So for those of
Agreed.
you that have joined us today, where have you found your AI tech?
So I've gone to the PMJS website. Actually, I was in this predicament back in January, if we remember. I looked there, found a couple places. They were a little too far for us to travel, just the time of year that we're in. So then I had to go into Facebook homestead groups. I went through the Mini Jersey Bull straw Facebook page, and I finally found one, but you definitely have to search pretty much all of these just to find a couple that might work for you.
We found ours on Craigslist, but now he's so full that he's not even advertising anymore. But I do regularly, when I see people online on Facebook or anywhere else, honestly, that say that they do this, I will add it to that. It's the to the AI catalog that is listed under resources. So there will be people constantly added to that as we're finding them. Okay. All right. Who's going to explain how we order straws? It's a kind of complicated process.
I can run through that one.
I was gonna say,
So,
go ahead, Sarah.
so ordering straws, you are not kidding there. It can be a complicated process. Your AI tech might carry straws and have them on hand, but more often than not, you're going to need to order them from whatever source, whatever bowl you've chosen. That could come in the form of ordering them online or kind of just reaching out informally to whoever owns the bowl. But you do have to do some of your own legwork there. Your Mini Jersey straws are going to be sold usually by the person that collected the bull, that had the bull either taken to a collection facility or had a vet come out and do the collection on farm. Straws can be what's called conventional, which means you may get a heifer or a bull. There has been no selection of any kind on the semen type in that. It's like a 50-50 draw there. Those are typically $45 to $100 per straw. So that, yes, that is per straw. And again, you're going to have a 50-50 chance at getting a bull or a heifer. And then there are straws that are called Heifer Plus and Heifer Select. Those are typically a little bit pricier, $78 to $175 per straw. Those have been chemically treated to make the male semen dysfunctional. So they won't swim as well anymore. At least that's the theory with those. The last sort is heifer sorted. Those are much more expensive. There are only a few places in the country that have this ability. So those straws run somewhere between $240 to $300 a piece, typically. The chances of getting a heifer out of one of these straws is about 97%. However, it's not 100%. You can still get a bull calf using heifer sorted, very expensive semen. So it's just a risk we take when we do order one of those straws.
Well, and it's not in the slide here, but the Heifer Plus and Heifer Select, I believe, is about an 85% chance of a heifer. So you do have a higher chance there of having a bull cow.
Yeah, perfect. That's great. So you do want to verify when you go to do your ordering, verify that each attribute that you think that you're getting is actually what you thought it should be. If you need a bull that is homozygous polled because you want all your calves to be polled, then make sure that that's still true. Make sure that the bull is still A2, the disease testing is in order. Before you hit submit on that order, just double check everything. This image down below is a really good example of this is an actual semen straw here. And there's some information on it that's really good to know. So right there in the middle, you'll see Bojo. I assume that's the name of the bull. And oftentimes they will put like the identification tag or the name of the bull. I'm not sure. But the ones I have always have like Boaz is the bull name and it's on there. It'll have the date of collection as well. And then you should see, I don't think this one's filled, but you should see a nice line of like clearish yellow fluid in there showing that it's a filled straw. And those are good things just to double check at the point of insemination as well. But we'll get to that point later. So this is really all you need to know about ordering straws right off the bat before you even consider anything else.
Perfect. Thanks, Sarah. So shipping is super important. The cost will definitely go between 145 to 100 or to $240 just for shipping. So what Sarah was saying is you're going to pay a certain price for your straws individually, plus you're going to pay for your shipping. Shipping is always separate. It's never included in the cost of the final cost of your straw. So make sure you're aware that you're going to have another shipping fee to tackle on top of your straw fee. With straws, you want to make sure that you keep them frozen for as long as you can until you're about to use them. Typically what clinics will do is they'll ship them in a shipping container, but that shipping container needs to be returned within, I think it's like 24 to 48 hours typically, back to the shipping company. So you have to plan and make sure that you have a way to store them. You can always store them at a local vet's office, or if you have a straw container, you can absolutely go ahead and store them there. Just make sure that you have your container filled up, because I've made that mistake before.
Right. I see it asked a
So-
lot on mini Jersey bowls and AI straws. Can I just store it in my refrigerator, in my freezer? And it's not cold enough in what we store our food in.
Correct.
It actually has to be colder than that. So it's stored in either vapor, in a vapor tank, nitrogen tank, or liquid nitrogen tank, which is why it's a biohazard when it ships. There are some newer
Right.
tanks with newer technology, and you can ship them a little bit less expensive. And that would be the vapor tank, because when it spills, like it were to tip, nothing can spill out. And that's why it's a biohazard. It's so cold, it can actually damage you. And they're going to get into that, I think, with handling the straws.
Correct.
So, here we go. Oh, when to breed. That's super important. And my tech tells me that that is where most people make their mistake, is that they aren't actually breeding at the right point in the heat, or they think that a cow that's grouchy is in heat and maybe she's not even in heat at all. So who's going to share with us about how we're going to detect these heats?
Yeah, I can take that, Lorinda. So that is extremely true. And I'm an AI tech myself. So this is probably the point of failure 90% of the time when your cow's not getting bred. I just can't get my AI done, that kind of thing. Natural heat detection or cedar protocol heat detection, that is a learned skill and something that us cow owners really have to work on. In order for your straw to be effective, it has to be used when a cow is in heat. Some of those signs that a cow is in heat can include mooing. She can be being mounted by other cows, and she might be mounting other cows. Swollen vulva, mucus production out of her vulva, lower milk production if she's in milk, behavior changes. They might be a little bit more affectionate. They might have a little bit more attitude, just kind of depends on the cow. And that heat can either be natural or chemically induced. And what I mean by that is naturally the cow's cycling, her body is telling her when to go into heat, or the chemical induction one is when we use synthetic hormones and a couple of different devices to force a cow's body into ovulation. That process is called CEDAR, which stands for Controlled Internal Drug Release. So if you ever hear of your tech suggesting CEDAR, they're talking about hormonally introduced ovulation. You give these drugs at a timed interval to bring about a heat. The hope is that these drugs are actually going to produce a heat, but there's no guarantee that that is going to happen. Some cows just their bodies aren't as suggestible to the hormones as other cows. So you really don't know until you try if that's going to work. One thing from natural heat to CEDAR protocols, natural heats can be difficult to detect, but if you can detect it, there's a bit of a better pregnancy rate on that. CEDAR protocols are sometimes lower. I've used protocols that have up to like 85% success, and then protocols. There are protocols out there that have a lower pregnancy rate. So discussing that with your tech and seeing which one they like to use, what works for them, make sure that they know what that success rate is on that CEDAR protocol. If you are trying to get everything timed perfectly, you want your cow to be bred and have her calf at this time and date, sometimes the CEDAR protocol is a little bit easier. In addition to that, your tech may need to use CEDAR protocol because they can only fit it into their schedule on this day at this time. So the advantage of CEDAR is that you can really schedule it, you know, to the best of your ability when you're using the CEDAR protocol. If you have more than one cow that you want to breed and want them all calving at the same time, CEDAR is a good way to do that too. 10 CEDARs in a package costs about $160. So if you've got 10 cows you need to do, the CEDARs themselves will be about $160. There's also the hormone, the synthetic hormone injection component on that. And I won't venture to talk about how much those things cost because that's going to vary location wise. So there's something really handy that I like to use for detecting heat because we can't be out there with our cows 100% of the time. And even when we are, we don't speak cow. So what seems like might be in heat could maybe not be, or she's totally silent and not showing you anything, but she's definitely in heat. Cows are really the ones that are going to tell us. And what we use is this product called Estrotect. It's a sticker that you slap on the back of a cow's tail head, kind of over the rump a little bit. And when other cows are mounting her and she's standing for that mounting, she's saying, yes, I'm ready to be mounted, and this is an okay behavior for me. Most of the time, cows will move away from that because it's also a sign of dominance. But if they're standing for it, this Estrotect thing, it has like a film on top, and as they get mounted, that film will rub away. So if you see it rubbed away and it's that bright color, then you know your cow is standing to be mounted and she's definitely in heat, ready to go. So those are the two options you have for when to breed. Any questions on that?
I have a question on the stickers.
Mhm.
So, as far as timing, like as soon as you see it fully red, that means that you should be doing your AI procedure as soon as possible, or is it a certain amount of time after you see that?
So when your cow is standing to be mounted, typically the general knowledge is that she is not ovulated yet. About 12 hours after she stands to be mounted, she's going to ovulate. So you don't want to necessarily ovulate when it's red, when she's standing to be mounted. You want to wait maybe 8 to 12 hours after that. So if my cow, I notice a lot of mounting and she's standing for it in the morning, I won't AI her until 8 p.m. that evening because I want to make sure I get my timing right, if that makes sense.
The stickers are really helpful though, if you're like, say you have to be away from home because you're at work and you don't work from home, they can kind of be like a backup to help to catch that behavior if you didn't see it yourself. But you do still have to be watching the sticker. And it just kind of rubs off like a scratch ticket would. So it doesn't get rubbed off unless someone is up on top of them. So you can just kind of check it when you're milking, or just go out after you get home from work and see what's doing. But it gives you an idea kind of when she started standing, because she wasn't when you left for work, but now it's going like it's starting to turn. So she's obviously they're having a little horseplay going on. And then the next day you may notice that it has been rubbed off. And so she's definitely started standing. So you'll want to breed that night when you get home from work. So you can call your tech and let them know, hey, today's the day.
Can I also add, this might be a little unconventional, but another way that if I'm just not 100% sure if she's in standing heat, I'll get behind her and actually try to jump on her back.
Mhm.
And if she stays there and doesn't move, she's ready to go.
Yep, definitely. You'll see
Yeah.
the other cows lay their head on the cow that's coming into heat.
Yes.
And sometimes
Yes.
she'll stand there and then they'll try to mount. So they're kind of
Correct.
testing it exactly like what you're talking about. Okay. What to expect when that AI tech shows up at your house?
Okay, I can do this one. So basically what we're gonna do when the AI tech gets there is we want to contain the cow. So if your cow is very used to being touched and handled, usually just haltering her is fine. I put mine in my milk stanchion and she does perfectly fine. I just tie her tail to the side and she's fine. If they're not as comfortable, or usually a heifer, you might want to consider a Shupe, just so they're a little bit more secure because they don't know what's going on and you don't know what to expect from the cow themselves or the heifer themselves. The tech is going to just go ahead and get the straw ready. He's going to warm it up. He's going to place it either in a thermal that is preheated to the temperature, the water temperature that it needs to be to unfreeze that semen. And then he'll prep the AI gun and go ahead and insert the straw into the AI gun. Now, from the time that he inserts the straw into the AI gun, it's about timing. They don't have a lot of time, so you want to get a tech that knows what they're doing, that can find those horns and just pull back just a little bit and go ahead and insert that semen. So typically, if you're right-handed, what you're going to want to do is stick your left hand in rectally. And if you're left-handed, you're going to want to do the opposite. You're going to stick your right hand rectally and then go ahead with your left hand with that straw. And typically what they tell you, and Sarah, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is you want your right hand to basically do all the work, or I'm sorry, you want your left hand, if it's the one in the rectum, you want that hand to be doing all the work, and the hand that's holding the gun and the straw is just basically there kind of like moving through real slow. They'll go ahead and use some lube. They'll clean the vulva down and they'll just go ahead and go in, like I said, rectally. And then once the semen has been shot inside of the cow, what I like to do is when I pull that straw out or that gun out, I always like to check the tip to make sure that there's no blood and to make sure that all the semen has been released, just to make sure that I haven't wasted a straw. So then you're going to want to wait 21 days for pregnancy testing, and then the next slide, I believe, is how you pregnancy test.
There is a note here too that PMJS is, I believe, the only registry that offers the members, specifically lifetime members, $100 towards your AI class. Locally, they run about $350. So that makes a pretty decent dent in the cost of getting the training, whether you decide to pursue AI as a side business for your homestead, or you just want to make sure that you really understand the process so that you can be more successful with it. So Sarah, is this a slide you're going to cover?
Yeah, sure. All right. So it's really important before you go ahead and attempt an AI that you have done everything you can to make sure your cow is in the best potential situation to become bred. You're going to make sure she's old enough to be bred first off. With mini jerseys, I've heard several different things. I've heard people wait till about 2 years of age to breed. Personally, I think that's a little late because mini jerseys have a propensity to put on weight a little bit easier. That's not every cow. That's just my experience with my cows. So I like to breed somewhere around the 15 to 18 month mark. And I've found that that's pretty successful right in there. So she's got to be old enough. Obviously, you don't want to do anything less than 15 months. Some people do less, but I wouldn't recommend it. And then make sure that she's cycling regularly. Is she having regular heats? Are you noticing regular heats? Does her behavior change just slightly? Even if you're not an expert at detecting it, you're trying to track and see that she is coming into some kind of hormonal shift throughout the month. You also want to make sure that she's past the point of calving at an appropriate interval. So my cows get bred 60 to 90 days after they have calved. So if they calved in January, I'm going to do it 60 to 90 days later, which means at probably the end of February or somewhere before the end of March. And that's, of course, depending upon the cow, but that's kind of the industry standard is 60 to 90 days. We're going to avoid weather extremes. So August is a really terrible month to be doing AIs. Cows do not love to get successfully bred when it's very hot. Cows have a harder time in the heat than they do in the cold, but that very, very hot end of August weather is just really not great for them and it's stressful. So they don't want to get bred. Same thing with the opposite. If it is -9 outside, the chances are lower that your cow is going to get bred. Number one, because that temperature is stressful on her and she's doing everything she can just to stay warm. And then number two, when you're doing these AI processes, it's typically outdoors. And the AI gun is usually a metal gun. It's very cold, but it's not the kind of cold that we want with an AI straw. We just went through the process, right? We are taking it from liquid nitrogen temp, which is around 450 degrees, I believe, negative 450 degrees, then in a warm bath, about 96 degrees Fahrenheit. And now you're going to put it in a gun, which is potentially cold because it's been out in the weather. Your tech should be keeping it warm somehow. But that's another thing that I've found that can make it a little bit difficult and dicier when you're trying to get a cow bred is it's harder to maintain the correct straw temperature in those cold temps. Make sure you provide excellent nutrition for your cow. If she can't sustain herself, she's going to have a really hard time convincing her body to sustain another life. We're going to limit stress. Sometimes if you've put your cow through a stressful situation, let's say a transfer, I've got her bred here. She's been there for 3 weeks, and then I transfer her 3 weeks after she got AI'd, and it was a 4-hour trip. There are studies out there which show that those stressful events like that can reduce your pregnancy rate by about 60%. So just be really careful when that egg is starting to implant around the 2 or 3 week mark. We're not putting your cow through anything unduly stressful. This one's a big one. Make sure you hire an experienced and confident tech. Your tech, maybe they're new, maybe they're just learning, but if you've got somebody like that, you've got to go into it knowing that maybe you might not get the best rates of pregnancy with that person, even if they're confident. But it's something that hopefully you can source somebody who is experienced or at least has a little bit more knowledge. For example, like myself, I have only been AIing for about a year, but I feel really confident in my ability because I have an extensive medical background and I do have multiple cows successfully bred in and around my area. So I know that what I'm doing is working. And that's another thing, if you're going to go with an inexperienced person, just make sure that they do have some cows bred and that those cows are confirmed.
Right.
Read
'Cause
your
that's gonna
medication.
make the difference between using your $45 or $100 straw compared to using a $300
Yes.
straw. So knowing
Yes.
that going into it can help you make a choice that may leave the
Yes.
window open for other breedings if you need it.
So important. Yep, definitely. Which is important to note that when I started with $15 straws, so it wasn't too bad of a mess up if I didn't get it. We're going to read medication labels and check before using herbs. There are some herbal treatments for cows out there that, let's say we're using it for, and I don't know that there's anything in an herbal dewormer that can impact fertility, but let's say there was, and you're giving it to your
wormwood. Wormwood can
Is it?
cause abortion.
I couldn't remember if there was, but it sounded like I knew that at one point and I've forgotten it since then. But yeah, so if you're using herbal dewormers or herbal treatments for whatever, make sure that you know how that's going to interact with fertility. Some of these herbs are very powerful and they can cause hormonal fluctuations. So just be careful with that kind of thing. And then, of course, removing toxic plants from pasture. That's really important. Some of these plants can be so toxic that they cause a cow to abort their fetus. They make it really difficult for the cow to stay healthy, so she can't even become pregnant to start with. a lot of variables that go into preparing your cow, but this is a good list of just where you can start and make sure that you've got all of the things lined up to have a successful and bred cow. Okay.
Question on
Ashley,
that one?
yeah, go ahead.
So I'll try to keep it kind of general, but it's a specific question, but maybe I'm thinking it would apply to other people. Like, we have a cow who's going to be leaving from here probably July. So we were trying to decide, do we do AI here before she goes, or do we wait until after she's settled in at her new place? And especially with the stress of the 2 to 3 week mark thing, I'm thinking it probably would make sense to wait until the fall, because otherwise, like, if she's leaving in July and we're breeding her here before she goes, but we have to make sure it's early enough that we're not in that window, then that would be like a really early calf the following year. I don't know. I guess like the general question is, like, if you know a cow is going to be transported, would you think it would be safer to just wait until after she's settled in at her new home?
Yeah. So I actually had this situation happen this last fall. And do as I say, not as I do is basically my take on that. So one of my cows bred, and then 2 weeks later, we transported her to a fairgrounds, and then she was there for 4 days and then back. So she had 2 trips in that really delicate period. Fortunately, she didn't lose her calf. She's still pregnant. But it was not the smartest thing on my part. And it wasn't until we had her loaded up in the trailer and we're driving down the road that I realized maybe I should worry about this, like stressing her out too much. And I did look up articles on the way over to the fairgrounds, realizing that this was not a great idea for her. So it can be done. I'm not saying it can't be done at all. It's just something to think about. If you were going to do it beforehand, I think what I would do is get her bred, wait that 21 days, get a pregnancy test. If she's pregnant and it's been 21 days, if you can give her that window, there's a much reduced chance of her having any kind of adverse event with the pregnancy. If you can't do that and you have got to move her at that 2 week mark, I would say wait until the fall.
Okay, thanks.
Definitely. I had the same situation where I sold a bred heifer, and she left from North Idaho and went to, let me think, California. And she lost the pregnancy because it was in that first early days of the trimester. And she had left confirmed bred. So it happens. It's things like you don't really think about it until your cow's up in the hoof chute and she's flipped on her side and she's all strapped in, getting her hoofs done. And you're like, oh, I hope this isn't too much stress. But knowing that, you can kind of schedule around it. And so if you have the option to reduce their stress, then of course do that for them. Otherwise, kind of keep a closer eye and make sure that that pregnancy is still going. Maybe even go so far as to do a second pregnancy test, which is pretty common, honestly, at about that 4-month mark, to make sure that they got through the first trimester.
Okay, so prior to breeding, so before you even start to breed your cow, we recommend to have about 2 straws per cow before you're going to breed her. You want to talk with your tech to make sure that they're available. For one thing, you want to make sure that you're on their schedule, and they plan to be at your farm the day, or ready to be at your farm the day that she is in standing heat. If you don't have a storage container where you can keep your straws, a lot of techs do keep them, but they do charge a storage fee. So I would definitely ask them, if you can store it, what do you charge and how long do you usually charge? And then make sure that they know that that's the straw you're going to be using when breeding.
And typically a storage fee is something like $15 a quarter. So it's, $60 maybe for a whole year. So it makes sense when the cost of shipping that straw the next year for breeding is going to be maybe $150 to $240. That $60 in storage saved you quite a bit of money. And then if she weren't to take with the first straw, you've always got the other option. But do ask ahead. I have heard some horror stories where techs are charging $100 a quarter, which is absolutely ridiculous. Nitrogen is not that expensive.
Yes, it's happened to me. Lorinda knows it's happened to me where I didn't know that they were charging me a storage fee and they were, and it was almost 2 years later.
Right.
So,
And it should only be about maybe $10 to $15, depending on how many straws you have. If it's one
correct.
straw, it may only be $5 or $10 for a quarter. So, what, $20 for the year isn't a big deal.
Correct.
When you're talking about straws that are $300. So
Yes. When you go ahead and secure your straws, you want to make sure that the tech that you're choosing knows how to store the straws. There's horror stories of, buying, 10 straws and you get one for free, but the AI tech didn't know how to store them and the straws are all gone. So you want to make sure that you have them safely secured and that the AI tech knows exactly how to store them. When you're hiring an AI tech, you want to make sure that you have your cow ready for them when they get to your farm. They're not going to go and catch your cow or help you, wrangle her into the chute or into the stanchion. You want to make sure that she's ready for the AI guy when he gets there. You want to make sure that she's calm and she's not fussy or stressed out. Because like Sarah just said, stress is a huge part of it. As women, we know if we're stressed, fertility is very difficult. So you want to make sure that she is not stressed. She's calm. She's maybe having a treat or something.
well, and restraining them for breeding doesn't need to be complicated. I've used our trailer that we transported our cows in, and just tied their head, and then they're standing in the trailer. It's not a big deal. We've used something just as simple as my husband and I pushing on the cow and keeping her held up against a wall. If the head is tied and you've got control of how much the rear end is moving, the tech should be able to do their job pretty easily. Usually your cow is standing and she's told you she's ready, so she's not going to fight it too much.
Correct. And we've done the trailer method too. Yeah, as long as her head is secure, it should be an easy task to accomplish.
How to pregnancy test. Now, we've said 21 days pretty frequently, but I think what we really are saying is 28 days, because at that 21-day mark, we are expecting the next heat to be coming. So that's when we're watching for it. And it can be anywhere from 18 to 24 days that the heat could come after the breeding if she didn't take. If you don't see that heat, then you want to take a test and make sure that she is actually bred. And you're going to do that at the 28 days or later mark. The longer you wait, past 28 days, if you want to go 35 days to be sure, that's great. Heifers can actually be tested a little bit sooner. So 28 days for heifers, not going to be a big deal. But with a cow who calved, if she's bred fairly quickly after her last pregnancy, the hormones may not have come down enough even to come back up again. So they ask that you wait at least the 28 days for a cow. But for a heifer, you can breed her on, pregnancy test on 28 days. There are quite a few different ways here to be able to do the pregnancy testing. I don't know that, are you guys really familiar with these? Because there have gotten to be some new ones that, for example, I've used the urine test, the P test, and had not very good success with it, but it says that it's 92% accurate. Unfortunately, it said that my husband was expecting, so I'm pretty sure that's not as accurate as I would like it to be. But, and I did have one cow that it never worked with her, but it's very inexpensive. It's only $6 and you get the results really quickly. And it did work for some of my other cows, but it's, you gotta keep it refrigerated and it's a little bit touchy and it didn't work for everyone. Milk sampling is really easy and you can run some disease tests at the same time. That's usually what I'll do. It's pretty inexpensive, depending on which lab you're using. Palpation is not recommended that everybody tries that. And the reason for that is because, like we've talked about, the pregnancy is so delicate in those early days. If you're testing with palpation, they're actually going in and trying to feel in the fallopian tube and down into the uterus to see if they can find that there is something there. If it's much later in the pregnancy, then it's not as risky. You're not as likely to actually cause any damage. Let's see, blood sampling is probably the most common. Most people will have their tech or their vet pull some blood and send it into the lab. That is probably the longest way to actually get a result back from my experience. But it's also the most accurate. When that pregnancy test comes back from a blood sample that they are pregnant, you can guarantee that they are. And then there's something new, which is a home blood test. And I think, Sarah, Burton, did you use a home blood test? Did you say that you were using
Yeah.
a particular one?
Yeah, this is what I use primarily now, and I've had good success with it. My last test went a little bit sideways. The results were very, very weird, and I think I got a kind of a dud of a test. But if you're comfortable drawing your own blood, I mean, these tests are only about $10 a piece, and you can do it pretty simply at your own home. I think they're a good option for just a small home.
I did try those. I tried a different brand than you. And I don't know, it was pretty accurate when my tech did it, but when we did it, we didn't feel very confident
Easy
in
to
the
do.
results. Yeah.
Yeah, so it just
home
kind of
blood
depends
sample.
on where your comfortability level is. I do want to add this about internal palpation. So, like you said, Lorinda, that very first trimester with internal palpation, if you're going to go that route, you've got to make sure that your person doing it, whether it's a vet or a tech, they have to be very delicate. I've known people who have a vet come out, the vet does the check, says, yep, they're bred, and the next day she aborts. So just be really careful with that. And I also add this as well. After that first trimester, from the 3 to 6 month mark, 3 to 5 month, 3 to 6 month, that's also a very, very weird time to do internal palpation. The pregnancy can sometimes be so far down over the cliff of the cow's pelvis that you can't feel much. And if you have a really, really, really seasoned tech, or vet, they'll know what they're feeling for. But more often than not, that's a really blind internal palpation check. So
That's a good point.
I only use internal palpation when an animal is suspected to be like 6 or 7 months or beyond, and they're not sure if she's bred, and we're not sure if the neighbor's bull snuck over the fence or something like that. So, but that is the only time that I like to rely solely on internal palpation. If I'm doing internal palpation at 5 months, you bet your buttons I'm also going to do a blood sample as well, because I don't want to tell somebody you're going to have a calf in 4 months, and then 4 months comes and goes, and oh, we should have been AIing, like that whole time. So
You know
just
what I
something
just
to think
realized we
about.
missed on here? I've had my vets before do an ultrasound where they have a wand that they go in internally.
Oh
And
yeah.
that's pretty successful as far as being able to find a pregnancy. That really early 28 days, I've had them tell me that a cow is bred and she wasn't, or that she wasn't bred and she was. So I think that's probably more successful after the first month when you're getting more into like the second month and they've missed a heat or two. In my experience using the ultrasound, but you get a result right away, which is nice if you've got a cow that you bred and you're trying to get her sold and you want to be able to confirm the pregnancy for them, then the vet can let you know right away. And then you can let your buyer know, yes, she's confirmed by the vet. They took care of it today. And they can do that at the same time they're doing the disease testing for shipping. So that's really handy. And I would love to get one of those tools, but they run a couple $1,000s.
We had our vet do an internal last year, and the other benefit to that was she was able to give us a due date because it was a cow that we had absolutely no clue when she was bred, and she was within a week.
Oh, nice. Because I had minis, my vet was always wrong about the due date because she always thought they were younger, not as far into their gestation as they actually were. So I got to learn that she was consistently a month off. So if she said that the calf was due in July, I knew that I needed to look for it in June. Okay. Oh, we're at the end. Thank you so much, you guys, for joining us. Are there any more questions, or have you had any more experiences that you want to share with us? Oh, well, I do appreciate you coming. Thank you for hanging out with us. There are lots of places to find us online. If you haven't visited before, we ask you to come and check out our website. We've got lots of information there for you. Specifically under the home and the resources tab, you'll find all kinds of information about what makes a purebred mini Jersey so special, and not just your average mini Jersey. And thank you to Sarah and to Ashley, who presented with us today. We really appreciate the time and the effort that you put into our presentation.